Good evening. I think tonight that weather is on everyone's mind. And last time I checked, the snow was about to begin, so it's scheduled to begin about 8 and run through maybe 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning and then turn to rain. So, yeah, we're shooting for an hour meeting. We'll do the best we can to get you out of here at a reasonable hour. But thank you all for coming out in the potentially what will be the first snow of the season. Item 3 on our agenda, we're going to skip right to item 3, is public participation. If there is anyone in the audience who would like to speak on items that are not on our agenda, please step forward at this time. Okay, seeing no one, I'm going to move to item 4, which is our student rep update. We have Michael is back with us to update us on what's going on at the high school.
Okay. So first, this is just less of an update than the one you got 2 weeks ago from me, but just first of all noting that there's been really heavy discussion, student and teachers, around Mr. Light's first big snow day decision, shall we say. It's in some corners of the school, it's become an informal betting market. Yeah, that's been predominantly on our minds for today. I think the best conversation starter was the veracity of the snow day calculator. That aside, overall, just between the end of, for me personally, between the end of first term and Thanksgiving, it's just sort of a chunk that I think teachers and students like to sort of plan out, and like this is just maybe what we like to get done by Thanksgiving, and that's a benchmark I think some teachers tend to use. So whether it be assessments or just finishing this part of a book, that's just something that ends up working out quite nicely. This year we have relatively early Thanksgiving. Teachers have factored that in. And in other parts of the school, it's also sort of a transition. Fall sports are more or less over. I mean, Thanksgiving obviously has a football tradition, but winter sports signups are going on in full force, and some traditional things that basically happen every year. We had the Veterans Day breakfast hosted by some of our National Honor Society kids and other volunteers who served veterans in our community on the Veterans Day weekend. And also we have Cabaret, which is a big deal in our musical community, coming up on Friday and Saturday. And with that, I'll keep it short. You'll be hearing a lot more about the high school from Mr. Dory himself in about an hour. Sorry.
This was the first year that we sort of officially recognized Diwali, and I was wondering, I know my 8th grader came home and sort of reported about not having homework, but I was wondering if there was if you noticed at the high school or had friends that noticed.
I think a vast majority of us noticed that there was no homework and that it was related to the Indian holiday Diwali. Any understanding beyond that, I don't think I can speak on behalf of the student body.
Okay, that's fine. I was just curious.
Some teachers brought it up explicitly, and some had mentions of what it was for, the Festival of Light things, but most of them just probably said there was no homework due to this Indian holiday.
Okay, great. Thank you.
We have no minutes to approve this evening, but we do have, thank you, Michael, by the way. Thank you very much. We do have a warrant that I will read out now. We have 2 vendor warrants, 19-010PR and 19-010, in the total amount of $1,707,873.18, and 1 payroll warrant, P1910, in the amount of $2,545,176.35.
All right, well, good evening, everyone. Just a few items for you tonight. I want to just recognize, in case anyone has missed it, we are in the midst of a building project. And I want to just talk a little bit about that. I know we have a presentation coming later from our architect, but I just want to talk a little bit about that so that everyone in the community can have as many updates as possible regarding this project. So we are in the midst of a feasibility study for the C.T. Douglas Elementary School, and that is proceeding on schedule. The district recently submitted the preliminary design program to MSBA, and we did receive word back from MSBA that the initial review of the nearly 1,200-page document showed that the submission appeared to be complete. We do expect that we'll receive feedback from MSBA over the next month, and we will be sharing that feedback with Building Committee as appropriate. Building Committee also continues to review site options as presented by the architect, Arrow Street. These options that are under consideration include, and I just want to make sure we're clear about these, one is a renovation and addition to the Douglas Elementary School on its current site. The second option is a new construction of the Douglas and Gates Elementary Schools with a preschool attached on the current Douglas site and the adjacent Elm Street playground. A new construction of the Douglas and Gates Elementary Schools with a preschool on the Gates site, and then a new construction of the Douglas and Conant Elementary Schools with a preschool on the Conant site. Later tonight, the school committee will have an opportunity to hear from Arrow Street as they present the most current site options to you, and we look forward to receiving your feedback regarding those options. And I apologize, I'm reading this and I'm seeing the typo in the incomplete sentence, so I don't know what I was thinking when I wrote that, but there was clearly something. The Building Committee is also interested in hearing from members of the community regarding the possible site options and has scheduled 2 public forums. So these 2 public forums are going to be on November 27th and again on November 29th. They will be the same forum repeated twice, so people do not need to attend both nights unless they're really, really interested. These are going to be right here in the R.J. Gray Library at 7 o'clock p.m. We do encourage members of the community to attend. At that, there will be an opportunity to hear a presentation from the architect about the various site options, but then it's also really an opportunity for us as a building committee to solicit feedback from the community regarding the proposals. During the month of December, the building committee is going to continue to narrow the site options based on community feedback and all of the available information that we're receiving from the architects regarding the suitability of the various sites for construction purposes. The building committee, and this is an important component of this, and I know it'll be mentioned later, but the building committee is then tasked with selecting the preferred option on December 19th for submission to the MSBA, and that submission goes to MSBA on January 2nd. So again, it's the building committee that is ultimately tasked with selecting that site and making the final decision with that, and that does happen. Right now we're on schedule for December 19th, and then it will go off to MSBA on January 2nd. I think the purpose of tonight's presentation is to still provide, even though it's the building committee's charge to select the site, to be able to provide school committee input into that process. We felt that was very important, so I just want to make sure we're clear about that. I'm trying to do this each month for you, but I want to give you another entry plan update. So I am nearing the end of the initial phase of my entry process, and I will soon begin drafting my report of entry findings. I've also decided to schedule one additional family feedback session, knowing that sometimes schedules are tight and not everyone could make one of the initial sessions. So I'm going to do one more, this time at a district-wide level. So any family who wants to come meet me one more time and provide more feedback, I will be scheduling that. I expect to have the final date for that out to families over the next week so that they can make plans. I'll be doing that sometime during the month of December, but we have a number of different meetings that have been moving targets over the last week or so. So please stay tuned for that. And just to kind of recap my entry process for you a little bit, so far in the process, I've actually conducted student, faculty, and family forums at each of the schools in the district. As you recall, I did one-on-one meetings with each of you. I also did one-on-one meetings with every member of the leadership team and building principals as well to make sure I got their perspective. So far, I've spent over 30 hours in the schools visiting with principals and walking classrooms and seeing what's going on from a teaching and learning standpoint. I'm also scheduled probably in the next 3 weeks to probably spend another 20 hours or so in schools to really round that experience out. I've also reviewed a variety of data and relevant documents to the district as part of that. So what I do over the next month is I take all of that information and I'll be compiling that into a report. Throughout the month of December, I'll actually be sharing bits and pieces of that with the leadership team to make sure that the conclusions I reach are valid conclusions and they ring with the experiences of the district. And then that gets drafted into a report of entry findings, and I do present that publicly to you, and we're scheduled for January 10th for that presentation. So just keep that on the lookout. Quick budget planning update. We are in the middle of the budget planning process, and this has been ongoing through the work of the budget subcommittee and also the leadership team. Right now, we're in the process of developing initial budget assumptions and goals, as well as reviewing budget submissions from the various departments and schools. Looking ahead, we'll provide you with our first budget presentation and overview at the December 6th meeting. So that's our next scheduled meeting. You will start to see the budget come out from our office as a recommendation. And then, in the interim, we're going to be continuing to work with our leadership team as well as the budget subcommittee to hone that first presentation so that we can get your feedback. And then finally, I think, again, what's on everyone's minds, the looming prospect of school delays and cancellations is on everyone's mind as we brace for our first winter weather event. I think if you're out in the audience watching, you can see a winter wonderland behind us at some point here. As a friendly reminder to everyone, we do closely monitor the weather when we consider a delay or cancellation. Because weather can shift unexpectedly, we make the call to delay or cancel school in the morning of the event, and we try not to make that the night before unless there are extraordinary circumstances where it was clear that something was happening. But for anyone who feels the need to reach out to us the day before an event, we will not be able to give you an answer. We do wait till that morning. And then, we do also get that word out. Sometimes people are concerned about how early that call comes. We know it's inconvenient for some families, but we also know a large number of families need to make preparations for childcare during the day, and we need to make sure we get that call out to families as soon as we reasonably know that we're not going to either have school or we need to delay school. With that said, I just want to remind you, I did put it in my contract with all of you that it would not snow in Acton or Boxborough this year. So you're now responsible for taking care of that side of it. And to the high school students who evidently have a betting ring going on that, number of snow days this year, please take the under. All right?
So I've had a couple of people come up to me and ask me if 5:30 is like the cutoff for letting people know if it's a snow day, but it doesn't seem like there's a hard and fast rule on what time the call will go out, just depending on the weather.
I think that's a great point. We're going to get that out as early as possible. I'll be monitoring and communicating with people probably starting around 4:15, 4:30 in the morning, and we try to make that call. I'll probably try to make a call around 5 a.m. And get the word out as quickly as possible, knowing that people have constraints they have to work around. We do know sometimes the auto dialers we use can take some time to get to everyone, so we try and get it in the system by 5 a.m. and start getting that word out. So people should expect it by 5:30. There could be a circumstance where it might be later than that, but we hope not.
Thank you. So this is a big night for class size updates. We're going to be hearing from Marie Altieri on the elementary size class updates, as well as some enrollment projections. That will be followed by a presentation by Principal Andrew Shen on the class size update for the junior high, and that will be followed by a class size update, as well as a school improvement plan goal report and a report on the schedule changes at the high school. A lot going on at the high school by Principal Larry Dory and Associate Principal Beth Baker. So we will start with Marie. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I will try to be brief. You had a lot of my information at your October 18th meeting, and so I'll go quickly through some of this. I did put the whole NESDEC report in your packet. We can think about whether you want to actually have the whole report. I summarize it in my slides, so maybe it's too much. I don't know. But so our enrollment overall is flat, and I have the individual charts to kind of show you that. But basically, we're just down 28 students from last year. The overall projections were very accurate. I had gotten the projections maybe the day or 2 days before October 18th, so I was able to throw some of that in that presentation. So overall, we were only off by 24 students, or 0.04%. But as I told you at that last meeting, kindergarten still proves to be a challenge. This slide was in that meeting. So just to remind you that in this particular year, Acton had 27 more students than were projected, and Boxborough had 15 fewer. So in terms of the number of classrooms we had, we're still pretty balanced that way. We need to leave room in the Blanchard classrooms for the hometown guarantee. So those class sizes are slightly lower now, but they'll grow over time. Overall, kindergarten, we had 16 more students, but the number's 330, so I want you to kind of remember that. Last year was 353. That was a really high year. And if you remember, the housing sales had really skyrocketed for a period of time. It's more stable now. So I think it's the 353 that was the anomaly. That is not a typical year for us. This year, 330. The projection for next year is 349, which I'm going to say out loud, I think is actually a high projection. At least the Acton number, I think, is high. So we'll see how that goes. And this is the history of the last 4 years of kindergarten. And you can see I think we've settled in between about 315 and 330 as a norm in this era where we really are flat with enrollment, and that 353 was an anomaly. The housing sales I have not updated because I'm going to go annually, so it's really better to report it calendar year. So in January with the budget Saturday, you'll get those numbers. But they had definitely skyrocketed for a period of time, and it's a little more stable now. Okay, so this is the long term from 2008 to 2028, and the line is this year where we are now. So overall enrollment has dropped from a high of about 5,900 to just under 5,500, and we have a little bit more of a dip K-12, and then we start to go up, but we're pretty close to what we call the trough. What really matters is separating it by levels. So I have the 3 levels here. So elementary has been at the trough for 4 years and will continue for the next couple years and then start to go up again. So we've been right around 2,700 since 2014, okay? And then 2 more years right around 2,700, and then we start to go up, and 10 years from now, we expect to be up about 200 kids. We dropped from 3,000, we're at 2,700, so we have had the drop at the elementary, which is a very good thing because the way the needs of our students have changed and our needs for space as a result, we would really, I don't know what we'd do if we had 300 more kids right now. The junior high, we thought that it was sort of a jump for a year or two, and that has proven to be true. So last year was sort of a jump in there, and it's come back down. The junior high only has 2 grades, so if you have a 40-student jump or drop, it can be pretty impactful within team sizes. Andrew's going to talk more about that. But we're settling in right between 850 and 900 for the next many years, right? And we're right about 900, 923, I think, this year. The high school is really interesting because it's been much more gradual. The drop we had at the elementary, the economy turned around in such a way that the high school did not have the kind of drop that the elementary had by any means. So these numbers are Acton and Boxborough students, peaked at about 1950. With our choice students, they went right over 200 or just over 2,000. But about 1950, and we're right around 1837 now, I think is the number. We're going to be at 1,800 for the next several years, dropping to about 1,750. So not as big of a drop. And so we're really settled in right around 18 to 1850. So I will say at all 3 levels, we are stable and flat in enrollment. Kindergarten's the one place that's a bit volatile. You might remember this chart. This was a big chart last year. And I added in the new projections, and you can see that we're much more on target now. So I think we did a lot of really examining and studying what was going on. So the black line is at the solid black line are the current projections. The purple dotted line was last year's projections. So last year and this year, very consistent. It was the 2 years before that. So the line at the bottom reflects the projections from 2015, And then the line in the middle, 2016. And then 2017 and 18 are pretty well in line with one another. So we're feeling pretty good about the overall, but as recently as 2015, we thought we were going to drop, this is just elementary, we thought we were going to drop to below 2,200. And really, the trough is 2,700. So pretty remarkable turnaround in the economy and housing sales. But now I think we're seeing some more consistency. All right, a little bit about class size, elementary class size. A reminder of our class size policy: kindergarten 18 to 20, grades 1 through 3, 20 to 22, grades 4 through 6, 22 to 24. Our current number of sections is 124. The only change I'm projecting for next year is that one of the 6th grades is going to graduate out, so we can drop one section. I'm going to recommend that we keep the same number of kindergartens, but we move one from Blanchard to actually the Douglas School. So Douglas will go back to having 3 kindergartens starting in September. If you look at the exact enrollment projections, Boxborough's 41 for kindergarten, which is just a few too many for 2 classrooms, particularly given that any more kids have to go in those 2 classrooms. So we want to keep 3 at Blanchard. We have had significant requests from Acton families to attend Blanchard, so I'm confident that we can fill any empty seats. But we may also get more than 41 kids. That's a big drop. The projection for this year was 75, and we got 60. The projection for next year is 41. So we'll see. I know the birth rate has dropped a lot, but there's also been a lot of housing turnover. Conversely, this year we got a lot more Acton kids than were projected, but now the projection is very high. It's 308, which is higher than we've had. So I wouldn't be surprised if we ended up with fewer. It feels like, and NESDEC's doing the projections now, there's almost like a yearly overreaction, kind of. So we're going to plan on 14 Acton classrooms, and if we really get 308 kids or more than 308 kids and we can't balance them between the 2 towns, we can come back in March with a proposal to add 1 more K. There's not a good space solution for that, so we'd have to move out a program somewhere to make that happen. So what we're recommending is 14 kindergartens in Acton, 3 in Boxborough, for a total of 17. If that holds the way we think it will, then we'll be reducing overall classrooms by 1, so from 124 to 123. And then next year we graduate out 2 6th grades again. So there'll be a drop of 1 or 2 sections next year as well, the following year. I added 2 slides from what you had in your packet Friday. These are familiar to you. They're just updated. So this just breaks out for you. The chart at the top is the current year number of classrooms. And you can, as a reminder, at Blanchard we put 4 Ks and 4 first grades this year. We were pretty worried. There's not enough room for 4 at every grade. So it's good news to have a drop in enrollment projections for next year. So if you look at the bottom, 2019-2020, you'll see 3 Ks at Blanchard for next year. Other than that, everything moves forward. So where there were 4 kindergartens and first grades this year, there will be 4 first grades and second grades next year. And that's how it works. If you go over to Douglas, we have had 2 kindergartens for 3 years in a row, and now next year we're going back to a 3rd kindergarten. And again, everything moves forward. All right? And then the other place there's a change is Conant, and Conant has a total of 20 classrooms this year, but there are 4 at 6th grade, and that will go down to 3 when everything moves forward. And so that's where we have the drop in sections. The class sizes are over to the right, and they're pretty comfortable this year and next year. And so you can see the overall class size has dropped, and we're at an average K-6 21.8 this year, 21.5 next year. So we've gone from over about 23 and a half to 24 average to 21.8, 21.5. And you can see all the averages. Each grade is within class size guidelines. If kindergarten plays out with projections, it's slightly over 20, it's 20.5. But like I said, we'll see how it balances out, and if it's really higher, we'll address it at that time. And my last slide is sort of another way of looking at the same data, the year-to-year changes and class sizes by grade. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Tessa?
So if you go back to the slide, on ours it says page 3, the elementary enrollment history and projection, the K through 6. Yep, that one. So if in a few years, which the building will be hopefully built by then, we're supposed to have close to 200 more elementary students than we have now, right? Is that what you said?
Does this have a pointer? Sorry, I pushed the wrong thing.
So right now we have around 2,700, and then by 2025 it goes up to,
Yeah, so
we're heading up towards 2,900?
we're not going high, we're not increasing 200 kids before the new school opens, so.
No, not before
Yeah,
the new school
okay.
opens, but just,
In 10 years.
right.
Yep.
Okay, so we will have the new school, but what my question was, are we planning for that with, I've asked you about class size
Yes.
and projections and how many students need to be in the new school. I mean, I know that we'll look to do whichever other school afterwards, but like, is there enough room to accommodate those
Yes,
kids?
100%. So the whole process was a 10-year average going forward that got us an average of over 2,900 over the 10-year period.
Okay.
So we're building for, I want to say 2,970 or something
Okay.
like that, total.
Okay,
And the goal is to have 3 classrooms at every grade in all 6 schools every year.
Okay.
And there are some years where we won't have enough students to support that, so we'll, have 2 in certain places. But
Okay.
yes, so it should be balanced, and we will add classrooms as we add kids to stay within class size guidelines. Great. Michael?
I have a couple questions. The first one is if we can go back to the slide change since the 2015, that slide.
Yes. This one?
Yeah.
Yep.
So if we look at the 16 projection and 17 projection, the curve look even the curve and also the enrollment projection, they look so different between the 16 projection and the 17 projection, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
exactly.
so my question is that what was the driver, you made a big adjustment to your 17 projection?
Yep. So in 2015, the economy really turned around and housing sales went up quite a bit in Acton and Boxborough, and it's housing turnover. So it's the selling of existing homes that drives enrollment increase the most. And so there was about a 15-month period of time where there were many more housing turnovers than anyone had anticipated. And we just historically, we've had 2 different enrollment projections. We don't do our own, so NASDAQ has done it for us always, and Peter and Mary Ann Ashton have done it for us for, more than 20 years. They have retired, so they're not doing it now, but we've consulted with them, and we've consulted with NASDAQ. We had several conversations, and we worked with MSBA, and they were very helpful as well. So, but yes, that big change in those 2 years was because of housing turnovers that were not anticipated based on the recent years of the economy.
Okay, my second question is that if we go to the section planning 19 to 20, that slide.
This one? Or-
Yeah, so if, no, this one, right. So if the upper table is the current year, right?
Yes.
And then the lower table is the projection to the next year.
Yes.
So, so if you look at the K, that row between two tables, and then in the 19 to 20, we have 19 students more in the K, right? In the total. The
According
19
to
to
the
20 right
projection,
now
yes,
is
yes.
349,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
the current year is 330, right?
Yep.
So my question is that, because if we look at the sections, the total is still 17 for
Yep.
both years. So my question is, why don't we,
Add a
add
classroom.
one more
Yep.
section in order to keep that class size?
So the kindergarten projections have not always been, the actual kindergarten students have not always been consistent with the projections, particularly when you're looking at it by two separate towns. We have, all of our kindergarten enrollment is in the first week of March. So 349 is an extraordinarily high projection, and I'm not sure that we're going to meet that, to be honest. So, last year they projected 313 or 314, and I said, you know what, we're going to have 330, and we planned for 330, and we got 330. I think we're going to get 330 again, to be honest, and I think we've settled in at that level, but we'll know for sure when the kids enroll. If we actually got 350 or more than 350, I would come back to you and talk about the potential of adding one more kindergarten. There's not a good space for it, so it's not an easy decision to do that. If we even got 349, the average class size is 20.5. Our guidelines are 18 to 20, so it is over, but not by a ton. And we want to make sure we have enough room for the grade as it grows over time. So if we don't add it for September, we could add it at first grade the next year. So I'm taking a little bit of a gamble that we're going to plan for a little bit fewer, and if we get more, I'll come back and talk to you. But rather than tell everyone we're going to have one more and then end up with some classrooms not fully enrolled, this feels like a better way to go right now. And if
Okay.
you all feel differently, then we'll go back and talk about it.
So the major driver for this 17 to keep that section's number unchanged is the space. We have a very limited space for
Not
the K.
necessarily. It's the volatility of the number. So until we see the kids, I don't
Yeah.
want to recommend. And if you look, it's the kindergarten history that makes me, that's a big part of why I doubt it. So that 353 was an anomaly. We've never been that high, ever. And 330 is about as high as we've ever been. So to assume that next year we're going to be at 350 again with only 41 in Boxborough, it just isn't making sense. So birth rates are down in both towns, and there's a lot.
So my last question is that even we reach the 349, that projection number, if the actual enrollment will reflect that projection number, we will still keep the 17 sections.
I think we would talk with the principals and weigh the pros and cons about moving a program out of a classroom versus adding a kindergarten, and the real number will matter.
Okay.
If
Yeah.
we're at 340, if we're at 360, if we're at, right at 349, I don't know, we might add, and we would talk to you guys about it, but
Okay.
we would explore the options and come back with a recommendation and see what you want to do.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
Well, just a point to make. When they do the projections, it's on kids born in a certain year, And so, like, we saw many more come in this year, so there's a chance that then those that were projected for next year aren't going to come because they came this year, but if they're born in the early half of the year or the second half of the year. So it's hard to stick exactly with those numbers. So I agree with your approach to, be conservative right now, and we'll adjust if we have to,
Thank you. Tessa?
Can you go to the last slide again?
I'm glad I don't have 40 slides. I'm just kidding.
Sorry, no, not that one, sorry, the one before it.
This one.
So, the numbers going to 2019, 2020, if we had 330 students, oh wait, sorry, what did I look at?
It goes to 313.
Yeah, it goes to 313. So, do we already know 17 students that are leaving? That seems unusual. Going from this year's kindergarten to first grade.
Your K 330.
If we have
is
330
projected at
students this
1,
year-
313.
Like, is
That
that
number's not right on this chart.
okay. Well, it just seems odd because the other ones all go
No, because
up.
we're going up 15 kids. So the next chart, 345 is what first grade should say.
Okay.
I think I didn't change it from the year before or something.
Okay, that's okay.
I will
It
fix
just-
that. No, great catch.
It
Thank
just
you.
seemed bizarre.
I
okay.
think the rest of them are right. I'll double check it.
Okay.
And we'll send this to you, the last two, and these go in the budget binder and all that. So you'll see these two charts again and again. Looks like a couple things might be wrong, so I'll fix them. But the totals are right. Whoops, it went off. Are we good? Angie?
Maybe unrelated question. Is the classroom size, is there a policy for the junior high or high school? I'm just curious.
There is not a policy for the junior high and high school. There are trends and patterns and goals that Andrew and Larry will both talk about, but it's not in written policy. Okay? Thank you.
Next presentation. Andrew Shen is here to talk about the class size update for the junior high.
Good evening, everyone. Good to see everybody. Here to present the annual class size report for the junior high school. There's people every year, they look forward to their season premiere of their favorite TV show or some release of a record. I look forward to enrollment updates, which tells you a little bit about the excitement in my life. I'm going to try, given the weather, I'm going to try and keep this as quick as possible and also just make some space for questions. Certainly some of this is a little bit redundant from what Marie shared, but certainly want to talk about overall enrollment, team size, given the team model here at the junior high school, math levels, which does have a little bit of a different approach given that we have levels in math, and then other trends that we find within the student population, including special education and just some food for thought as we digest the information. So as Marie said, we are at 924 students this year. 4 students off of the actual projection, so that's great news. I know last year all of us were a little bit nervous given the spike that Marie referenced where we were at 964 students, so we weren't quite sure what that might be suggesting, but in fact, the enrollment projections have been, at least this year, accurate to what we thought it would be. And it is starting to come down. The projections now have us within the next several years hovering between 850 and about 900 students, which is helpful. So it's showing that there is a bit of a decline and then some balance there. It is different from, and I think Michael pointed out, very different from what we had for a while thought was going to be a more substantial decline. We were talking about being in the low 700s within the next few years. That obviously has shifted. But that being said, I think we're still in a better place in terms of a more stable enrollment. So this just gives you a different chart right here. I put in red 964 last year. That was that spike that we had talked about. This year we're at 924, and then over the next few years we're in the high 800s, low 900. I do put the 8th grade current class size in orange, just because this is one of the years, which I'll make reference to later, where there is a fairly substantial difference in the current 7th grade and the current 8th grade. As you can see later on, they're a little bit closer in size in the subsequent years. In terms of team size, so obviously in 7th grade, because there are much fewer students than 8th grade students when you divide by 4, because we have 4 teams per grade, the team sizes are much lower in 7th grade than they are in 8th grade. I'm looking at Mr. Balescu back there, who's an 8th grade teacher, so he can attest to the team size on his team. But just, overall, we try and balance teams as much as we can. Obviously, it's not going to be exactly the same across all 4 teams, given that there are some considerations that we have to think about with programs that are attached to the teams and other variables, but we try and stay as close as possible. So in 7th grade, we're between 108 and 111, and in 8th grade, we're between 119 and 124 students this year. And there are 5 teachers on a team. What this gets to is if you actually divided a team by the 5 teachers you would have those average class sizes. I think where I mentioned the math levels, and there are a few other variables beyond math, is it's not as clean as simply taking the number of kids on a team and dividing by 5. So, for example, when you have different math levels, depending on the number of students who enroll in a particular math level, you still have a fixed number of math sections with which to work. So you have 4 math teachers in a grade, 5 sections each, that's 20 sections. So depending on where the students enroll in math levels, we try and project, and then we try and select the number of sections that will allow us a reasonable class size. But as you can see, for even just between the 2 levels, you'd have a slightly different math level. We try and have smaller class sizes whenever possible for our Math 7 versus our Math 7 Extended. Same thing in 8th grade, where we'd try and have lower, which we do, aren't successful with, Math 8 versus Extended versus Algebra 1. But even here you can see that there's a difference between Math 8 and Algebra 1 in terms of class sizes. This obviously are slightly higher because you have 489 students in 8th grade versus 435 in 7th grade. This just gives you a distribution in an even period on a team. You'll have students, different class sizes depending on what they're enrolled in. You might have some students who, instead of taking world language, are receiving other academic services, whether special education services, other services. So that obviously has a variable as well. So this is just to give you an illustration of how we try and stay within a certain range, but obviously there's going to be variation. Our exploratory classes, so this in elementary you call them specials, in junior high we call them exploratories. In each grade there are 4 exploratories, and they go by team. So instead of 5 teachers sharing a whole team's worth of students, you have 4 teachers. So that does result in some moments where you have higher class sizes, especially in the 8th grade. Another variable just to keep in mind, why, if you're wondering, why is it all the way from 18 to 29 or 19 to 26? This is the period where if students do need to receive additional services, this is the first area where instead of this class, they may be going to receive their services. So that's why there is such a wide variation. Obviously, I point the red arrows towards the 8th grade exploratories, 28 to 31, 27 to 32. That is because we have a lot of students in 8th grade this year, and you have 4 teachers instead of 5 team teachers to divide those teams up. So my hope is, certainly, I'll get to the first part is, as we get to slightly lower or moderately lower overall enrollment, it will have an impact, a natural impact on those class sizes. And so that is something that we are looking forward to benefiting from in terms of just the natural result of that. Certainly on teams as well for 8th grade teachers, hopefully going this year from 124 students on a team to maybe 116, 114. That matters and that helps. And so we're hopefully looking forward to that as well. In terms of space, we're in a decent place. I don't think we're in a place where we have a lot of flexibility with space like a lot of other schools, but we're in a decent place. I would say the one area that we actually monitor is less about the enrollment overall of students, but actually the enrollment in certain programs. So just to illuminate that the best way I can, right now, as you know, we are in a 3rd year of strings, 3rd year? It's like third year of strings. It's going well. So when we first started with 8 or 9 kids, we just put them in the auditorium during the period, brought some chairs in, and they started playing. if we start getting to, and I think we will in a few years, 100 kids, 120, you can't just every period bring in 120 chairs and set up. You'd be setting up during the whole period. So that's an example of less about overall enrollment and more about interest in particular programs. How do we account for that? So those are the things that when we get there, we'll have to figure out some creative solutions. But that's probably the best example I can offer for that. Academic support in English language learners. I think as many of you who have been here for a while know that we have an academic support center that is a general education support. That continues to be an area where we're both proud of it, and it is something that we continue to have a lot of students for whom it's something that people feel is appropriate support here at the junior high school. 117 students, which overall is about 12% of our student population. In 7th grade, we started the year with 63 students, which it's about 1 in 7 students in 7th grade starting in the ASC. There is fluid movement, so there are times where hopefully for some students they've developed some skills, they've developed some strategies, and now it's time to see if they can continue their success without the ASC. And then of course we'll have other students where they'll discover that they need a little bit more help. Perhaps some students move in where they need some transitional support, so it's very fluid. In terms of who comes in. It's also short-term, long-term. Some students where if they've been out for a while and they need support just kind of catching up. There's a lot of fluidity, and we continue to use this academic support center to support students who also receive English language services. As for English language services, it's kind of leveled out in terms of our numbers, 17, 20, 21. That's a pretty good range without much fluctuation. A couple years ago, we increased our staffing to have a full-time EL teacher, which has been great, and I think we're in a pretty good place. I would say in terms of our learning, in terms of the work we do in classrooms, we still have a lot to do and a lot to grow, but I think from a staffing perspective and in terms of a support perspective, I think it's been proportional. So now shifting a bit to enrollment and staffing for special education services. Again, I always give this caveat, it's baseline projections based on a snapshot in time. So things obviously change a lot with enrollment. This is based on the October 1 enrollment reports that we submit through SIMS, as well as our own internal reporting. So it's just really about a snapshot. And again, things change both in terms of increases as well as decreases. But just to give you a perspective from the graduating classes, right now in grade 8 and grade 7, we have those top two, which for a total of 152 students. As we think about students who are entering the junior high school over the next few years, grades 6 and 5, the overall numbers in each grade are an increase right now, so those are the number of students on active IEPs in both grades. And so if you were to simply assume that they were static, which as I said, we don't know, there would be an increase over time. What this presents you is if you actually did carry it forward, this is what it would look like. Certainly I think something, if you were to look carefully, and I did mention it in the class size report, is in 14 and 15, you have about 900 kids. And then in 2020, 21, you have about 900 kids. But if the number of active IEPs were to stay where they are, the number of students at the junior high who will be on IEPs is substantially more. So that is something that we've been paying attention to. A few years ago, we talked about this, which is where we reshifted some of our special ed modeling in terms of how we staff and how we structure it. So I think the good news is that in some ways we've been responsive. I think there's some shifts that we still need to be thinking about, but we have tried to stay ahead of things as best we can. So like I said, again, it's not static. You have students who move in. So we actually had 5 students registered to RJ Gray last week. So we're at 928, 9 now, 2 of whom are on IEPs. So that's just an example. But then you also will have, in fairness, students who are currently here on IEPs and they may move out. So there's just a lot of movement back and forth, and I just kind of want to make sure I mention that. Areas to monitor. So as a result of that, we are thinking very carefully about how we best structure the school to meet not only the overall numbers that we eventually have, but also the profiles that they present and the needs that that accompany those students. For those who, I think a number of you came on the tour of the buildings and we were able to talk a little bit about some of those changes. A number of our specialized programs have seen an increase in their programs in terms of students who are appropriately placed in those programs. So the numbers have increased overall, as well as sort of the diversity of their profiles and kind of what, how best to support them, both in terms of programming and staffing. So that is something that is a bit of a moving target for us that we've been thinking carefully about, talking to people about this year and next year. One of our programs I'd mentioned, and we'd been working with central office, we were at a point where typically we have tended to have 12 to 14 kids. Right now we're at 20 going on 22. And for us, it really demands sort of a staffing shift. And so within the current budget, we were able to increase staffing a bit to support that, which is great. And so that's how we're trying to approach it this year. Obviously, we have a budget process for next year that we have to participate in. We're not, junior high is not the only school in the district, as much as we'd like to think we are. So we obviously bring some of our thoughts and our needs to the table, and we reconcile them with everybody else's, and we see what makes sense. In fairness, we also have to think about the current staffing that we have, and do we shift how we use those staff appropriately to adjust to whatever needs that we see. So what I mean by, for example, in terms of shifts that are outpacing current models, right now we have a specialized program where I think in the past when you had 5 or 6 students in a grade in that program, it made sense to have them all on one team, right? If you have 12 or 13 in that program in a grade, having all 12 on one team may not be what's best for the 12 or 13 kids, the entire team, or the teachers in terms of maximizing the resources that you have or the services that you need to do. So do we need to think about making shifts and adjustments, and what are the implications of that? So those are things that we're thinking right now. It's really very early to say, yep, this is how we're going to do it. But it's just things that we have to continue to think about. And talking to elementary schools and letting them share with us more specifics about the students with whom they're working in 6th grade, how they think the transition should look, and then reconciling that information with all of what we have. So, I was told to keep it quick, which I did because of the snow. Questions? I apologize if I went quickly in some of the areas. Tessa?
So I already asked this question of those that can achieve numbers for me, but just in terms of academic support center, generally, do you find that kids just do academic support center and then go on to the high school and become fine, or is there like a percentage of students that end up sort of getting referred for additional services? Is it kids that are kind of weaning off of IEPs as they are in junior high? Like, is that
Both
generally what
directions. So I think it's fair to say it's both directions. We have some students where, let's say that perhaps they are being dismissed from an IEP at the end of 6th grade. The teachers might still say, and I think that's the right thing to do, and I think we'd love to just make sure that there's just a little bit of additional adult monitoring to help them make the successful transition. There's others where they may not be on an IEP. Teachers may say, but I'd really like you to maintain some additional monitoring and see, and so they may end up being referred for an evaluation, or they may end up we may end up deciding this is the right level of support given this time. It's an interesting animal that we always talk about, right, every year. 7th and 8th grade, it's 2 years, 2 transitions in 2 years, to what degree? And this isn't the time to say, oh, should we have more grades? It's just more, the reality is every year is a transition. And so I do think in some ways it's hard to discern the degree to which some of the value of the AAC is also because of the fact that we have frequent transitions.
So slightly differently, but some of the specialized programs,
Yep.
Do you find that there's more kids in them now because we've created these programs and we're keeping kids in district? I don't know what the level of support, and I don't know everything about all of those programs.
Yeah, I'd have to think about that more carefully. Do I think, or do I hope that we are trying to expand our bandwidth so students who in the past we may have been quicker to say, oh, I don't know if this is the right setting, we're trying to keep in district? I do think that that is a fair aspiration, to say that's an aspiration of ours. I don't know if that's what is the lever that is why we have these numbers, but I certainly would like to think that that's part of the equation. Amy?
I just, as speaking, someone who had 3 children at the same time, 7th and 8th grade, and all of them experienced different levels of academic support. I think the program that you have is really amazing. So one coming in off an IEP who transitioned very nicely, one that came in with needing extra academic support, but by the time moved on to high school was, ready to go, and one that came in not at the ASC, but joined later and has continued into the high school. I think the program that you have there is really a fantastic safety net for kids at any stage of where they are in their learning. And I know that part of that is the teachers that you have in that system, but also I think it's a really amazing program that has offered so many benefits to kids at wherever they are in their levels. And I know it continues at the high school.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. Michael?
Actually, I have a question. So, did we implement the MTSS?
The MTSS?
Yeah. Or in junior high, for example?
I would say in its purest form, no. I think as a district, we're still, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's an aspiration of ours, but I think we have some things ahead of time to try and clarify. So I would say no. If someone said, you have MTSS at the junior high school, the quickest answer is no, we don't. Do we have a system at the junior high school where when teachers identify students who are not as successful as we'd like them to be, the conversations that we have and the interventions that we'd like them to implement and having conversations with specific people? Yes, we do. Does it fit a particular mold that one could call MTSS? No, it doesn't. I think that's probably a larger district goal in terms of trying to figure out what are the common steps that we'd have regardless of any grade.
Because this is I think this is great. I mean, to have this assistant program.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, because I was in the MSA lecture of talking about MTSS.
MTSS?
Right, and then they were talking about similar thing, which is, the student they need.
Yep.
When they fail, they come, right? So this is kind of similar. So, but I just hope that, because my understanding that you still have the evaluation, right?
Yeah.
The reference before the students can come, right?
Do we still have like referrals and?
Yeah.
Yep. We would still have, there's still a process that would be in place.
Yeah, I'm
if
not
a
sure
certain-
if we could do, in the future, we could do that, just if a student himself or herself needs, something, they can come without a referee. Or,
Can they?
Referral.
So students cannot just drop into the ASC. They have to be recommended either by
Right,
the
that's
elementary
what I'm
teacher.
saying. Right
Yeah.
now, is the case, but
Right.
in the future, if we could do that,
That's,
so.
that's something for us to think about. I would definitely, not that I'm saying extra help after school is the magic pill that solves all, but certainly I would like to think that beyond any specific program, we have a culture where students feel that they can approach their teachers when they are struggling. Are we 100% successful all the time? No, but I think we
Well, just my
we
thoughts.
work towards that.
All
Yeah,
right.
thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. Could you go back to slide 16 for a minute, which is around your projections? Yeah. So I'm looking at this, and I'm looking 2 years from now, and it's striking,
Yeah.
the increase that we're looking at. And I guess my question is, given the history of your projections, because you're able to track, right, those number of students who are on IEPs, so they come up.
Right.
And granted, everything fluctuates.
Fluctuates.
How comfortable are you with this % increase coming in the next few years?
How comfortable I am with feeling that this is accurate, or how comfortable I am with that as a reality?
I mean, with the accuracy of those future projections.
Yeah.
I understand it's hard to gauge.
Right.
But we've got some history because you know what those 4th, 5th, and 6th grade IEP
Yeah.
numbers are every year as they come up and then as they land in your.
Do I feel comfortable saying that I think that there will probably be more students arriving at the junior high school with IEPs than we currently have? Yeah. Do I feel comfortable saying it's this percentage? Probably not. Just not a gambler, so.
My follow-up question then is in terms of planning, right? Because there's
Yep.
clearly going to be a need
Yep.
to provide those additional services. How soon do you get that information? So we just heard Marie talk about in March, we sort of know when kindergartners are going to land, and that is enough time sort of in the budgeting process to figure out what supports and what
Right.
staffing we may
Right.
need. do we get enough advance, do you feel like you get enough advance notice to be able to?
I think the best way to answer that is I started having conversations with elementary principals last month about next year. So I would say in terms of in preparation for just the immediate next year, I think we've gotten in the habit of talking about transitions. I actually had a conversation with a principal an hour and a half ago about a particular student. So I do feel comfortable with that. In terms of like 2 years out, that I think is a little bit harder and a little bit fuzzier. But in terms of any given upcoming year, especially as we start talking about, budget projections or proposals, we start in October, which always feels odd, right? We just started the school year and we're thinking about next year, but we have gotten in the habit of that. Please.
I think that's a good point, Adam. I think one thing in my experience I've found is when we look at specific students coming up, it's really not practical to try and predict more than 1 year out. However, I think where we need to look more than 1 year out is as we shift profiles of needs so that we can effectively plan ahead. So, for example, one of the things we've seen everywhere in, education over the last few years is shifting profiles, autism spectrum. We also see shifting profiles around social emotional needs, things like that. And those are the types of things we need to keep in mind. I don't know if, Dawn, you're thinking anything on that as well.
Yeah, because our overall numbers, as I run numbers in response to some questions we received this week, in 2014-15, 17% of our students overall were students with IEPs. Last year, we were at 15.6%, but when we look at students with autism, 4 years ago, that was 11.6% of our population, and last year it was 16%. So the needs are just different, and in some cases more intense, and in other ways not. 16% of students with IEPs, not 16%
right.
overall. Right, thank you. Yeah.
That's a good way to put it.
Angie?
You mentioned that there is a class with a great interest, so it has more than 30 students. There's a elective or something.
Oh, exploratory.
Yeah. So I guess the question, a general question is, I know there is no student size range for the junior high,
Sure.
but how do you decide, you're going to add another class, or what kind of?
Yeah, honestly, with our current schedule, we're pretty fixed into the sections that we offer in terms of exploratories. We have 4 off-team teachers, exploratory teachers in 8th grade and 4 in 7th grade. So it does become, honestly, if we said let's add a 5th, it actually becomes, I don't want to get into the weeds, but it becomes a scheduling circus. And so I will admit, for the past few years, we have said to ourselves, hopefully we benefit from the natural decline in overall enrollment, which will have the most direct impact on this piece. So what I am gambling on, whether it's smart or not, is that when we get to the lower 800s, there will be that moderate relief in these classes.
Thank you, Andrew, for that very clear presentation and a very clear question and answer. I really appreciate that. I can kind of have one question related page 8, presentation 8. I'm just curious about, we definitely going to keep, junior high will keep that 3 session of the math level, right?
Correct.
Okay. So there is a little bit, I'm just curious about, we have 26 to 29 students in 8 sessions, right? For extended and algebra 1.
Correct.
So that's 3. Is there some, I know you probably, I don't know, what should I say? How can we ensure 26 to 29 students in that one classroom get enough instruction for, so.
Yeah, I think the easy answer is certainly that a lot of our math teachers, and this may be interpreted different ways, they're used to class sizes that are that large. And actually last year we had a few sections of our Algebra 1 that were above 30. So I'm not trying to imply that, that this is ideal, but I do think we have teachers who have, just be given the restrictions that we have and the enrollment that we have, are better versed in terms of how do we still maximize the time that we have with these students, even though they are a little bit larger than perhaps all of us would like. So I do have some confidence that as much as I think all of us would love slightly lower class sizes, the fact that they are in the 26 to 29 range, I don't think has been for me sort of an area of crisis or significant concern. I think we still continue to want to help them develop different strategies, not necessarily about the numbers, but about certainly the diversity of profiles and needs within those classes. So for me, it's the number is not as significant as the students who are in there. How do we offer them a range? And our teachers have been working hard on that. So I don't know if that is a satisfactory answer, but I think that's kind of my initial response to that.
I think I certainly believe you. However, I don't know if some certain assistant could help with maybe 29 students and 25, 24. That's slightly different.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I do think at the junior high level, especially for students in extended Algebra 1, the assistant model isn't something that is common at the junior high, and other than certainly meeting certain IP requirements and needs for students, that's not something that I think we would be advancing. I think for us, it's really about supporting the teachers and how they grow in terms of meeting the students in front of them. If money grew on trees and people wanted to give me more staff, I think certainly that's great. But if you asked me where would we want to invest whatever resources we have, I wouldn't necessarily say assistance in the junior high school for math classes, but that's kind of my gut response. But I'm happy to continue thinking about that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, the final presentation on class size tonight will be from the high school. So we welcome Principal Larry Dory and Associate Principal Beth Baker to the podium.
Good evening, and thank you for having us. Before I start, I want to thank a very special person down at the office. Her name's Tina Vaness, and she really supports the district when it comes to data. She's not here tonight, and that's why I wanted to mention her, but a lot of the data that you'll look at, a lot of the reports that have been done, couldn't be done without Tina's help. Marie came by I think earlier in the week and spoke to me about last year's presentation, and I got the idea that some of it was a little bit too long, particularly the scheduling piece. So I'm going to make the scheduling piece as simple as I possibly can, and I think Peter can appreciate this because he worked in scheduling, I know, at Franklin High School as well. We build a new schedule every year. Every single class, every single time changes. The way we build a schedule is simple in many respects. We have resources that are teachers, we have resources that are courses, resources that are students, and we have resources that are student requests. We also have rooms. We take all that information, we take those student requests, and we go through the process of building sections. And we use PowerSchool, which is a scheduler building software. Pretty much put a lot of this information in, and hope it works out. And typically it works out very well. We do a lot manually as well. But what I appreciate about the October 1 report is it's sort of a report card on how we've done when we start to take a look at class sizes. So I'm just going to share some larger points from the October 1 report. And what you're going to see for the most part, okay, is when you look at our historical and current class size by department, we've been pretty consistent. Overall class size averages, this year we have a total of 1,837 students. Last year we had 1,830. That hasn't changed much at all. When you take a look at this year's average class size, this is a class size for all courses, and you can also see it's broken up by discipline. I'm not going to go through that tonight, but when you look this year, you see the average class size is 20.73. Last year was 20.97. And when you go back to school year 13-14, it was 22. So each year it has slightly improved. We feel pretty good about where our class sizes are. We have some areas we'd like to improve a little bit, but we have other areas that are very strong. These averages are only one data point, and I think range is very important, and I'll talk about the range of class sizes as well in a second. But overall, you can see over the past number of years, the class sizes have remained consistent. This is a very important slide to all of us in education, because this is current class size by level. And when we look at class size, we have a philosophy that our intermediate classes, which are called our CP1 classes, are going to be smaller than our honors and AP levels classes. Instructionally, we believe that needs to happen. We believe that our students in our CP1 classes need additional support, and they need to be in smaller class sizes, as I said. So the average class size currently for a CP1 is 13 students. The average class size for a CP class is 20. The average class size for the AE is 21. And the average class size for the honors AP, 23 students. Okay, and again, if you look across the various disciplines, you can see, you know, they range slightly from English to social studies to math, science, and world language. We do have some philosophical beliefs from discipline to discipline as it relates to size. I can respond to that if anyone has any questions as we go on. This is important. This is the range, and this is really what it's all about, because the averages don't tell the whole story. And I'm pretty happy about class size range as well. Currently, 27% of our sections have fewer than 19 students. 28% of our sections have between 19 and 21 students. 27% have between 22 and 24 students. And overall, 82% have fewer than 25 students in a classroom. That's an improvement from last year, and it's an improvement from previous years. We feel, again, pretty good about that overall. We have some specific classes that we do have some concern about size. The way we schedule and the way our schedule is set up has an impact on that, and I'm going to speak to that as well. One of the major factors that actually impact class size is our schedule. There's a number of things. I mean, students will make requests, they will change their schedules, we will move things around, all those sorts of things eventually impact the class size. But when we schedule, we would like to see our light courses, for example, Algebra 1 AE, have a range of just 2 or 3 student difference, okay? We're not always able to accomplish that. When you look at our schedule, you'll sometimes see a class size that might be 27, 28. You could find another one at 22, 23. There are factors inherent in the schedule that create that, and there's factors inherent in us being a very student-centered scheduling group. We really try to meet the needs of students. We really make a lot of changes to support students along the way. And in doing that, classes that start out balanced, if you looked at our schedule in July, you would see that classes are pretty much 1 or 2, apart from each other. We're right on. When we get through making the type of adjustments that we're asked to make, then you'll start to see these larger classes and these smaller classes. But this is one thing I want to show you relevant to our schedule, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, is if you look at our schedule, you'll see during periods 4, 5, 6, and 7, we have lunch, okay? Which means we have about 500 students during each of those periods that need to be scheduled for lunch. When you schedule those many students for lunch, you can't schedule that many classes. And this chart right here just shows you, period 1, okay, we're 100% scheduled. We have 0 free rooms. Period 2, we have 1 free room in the building. Period 3, 1. Okay, you get to the lunch period and you'll start to see 8, 16, 10, 12 rooms available. Okay, these are all a reflection on class size as well. When you look at classes being held period 7, period 8, period 1, 2, and 3, they're going to be larger because more kids are going to channel out into those periods. The luxury of this is again the 4 lunch periods, but the disadvantage is the fact that it's more difficult to keep classes, light classes, at the same size. So that's all I'm going to say at the moment. I will answer questions, but that's all I'm going to say about class size at this time. What I wanted to lead into a little bit was a discussion around the schedule change process. We've been 3 years into this process. Here's a little quick history right here. In 15-16, we began a study of the Bell schedule. We surveyed faculty, students, parents, and guardians, and from that we started to put together some goals that we felt we needed to look at. In years 16-17, we formed teams to research schedule models and look at pilot options. In 17-18, last year we did a 2-week pilot. We piloted mostly block schedules. We did that because we wanted students and teachers to have an opportunity to teach in an extended block period and see how that was received. It was a miserable week of weather. I think we had 3 snow days. We did manage to get all the block periods in, but it was disruptive. Schools with block schedules have to go through snowy weeks as well, and they figure it out. But when it's a 2-week pilot and you get hit that way, it's not as successful as we'd liked. But we did learn a lot about block periods. We did do surveys after that pilot. We did surveys of students, and we did surveys of faculty, and we got a lot of feedback, and we learned a lot of information. Overall, we learned that block periods for more students, most teachers, was not exactly what they were looking for. What we learned was our teachers wanted longer periods. We have 45-minute class periods right now, which are probably some of the shortest class periods you'll find in a public school. We lost 2 minutes off each period this year when we made the adjustment in the start time, which our goal is to get those 14 minutes back, and that's a part of the scheduling process that will allow us to do that. But 45 minutes is not a lot of time when you look at some of the ways our teachers want to instruct, when you look at the ways we want our students to learn. It's just simply not enough time. So the process that we went through was really to go back and take a look at our goals. We established goals very early on as we started to go through this process, as I said. And when we looked at the survey following the spring pilot, we looked at the student responses, we looked at the faculty responses, we took that information, we took it to our leadership retreat. We met for a day and then another meeting following that, and we asked ourselves, you know, do we have the same goals? Where are we going with the schedule? The reality is most of our goals are still the same. We believe in longer class periods to do extended learning. We believe that a schedule that would increase the likelihood that students will not have homework in every class is a good thing, and not have assessments every night or bunched up as they are. We still believe that a slower pace, fewer transitions is in the best interest of our students, certainly centered around on wellness and just lowering the temperature in the building. We still believe that it's important to maintain a reasonable lunch period for our students. Some schools have 22 minutes lunch period, some schools have 25 minutes. That's not reasonable in our opinion, and it's the number one priority of our students, it's a high priority of our teachers, and it's a high priority of us, that students have time to relax, socialize, and enjoy a lunch period. The other revision that was added was the simple reality. When we first did our schedule goals, the 14 minutes that were lost centered around the start time change didn't exist. And now accounting for the loss of 14 minutes has become a priority for us. The things that we gave up when we look at our original goals were the idea of having collaborative time for teachers to work together during the school day, or at least scheduled collaborative time for teachers to work together during the school day, and an activity block that we were interested in fitting that in as well. We are committed to our advisory block at this time and making our advisory block as strong as it can. And we have a way to go in that direction, but we're moving in the right direction with that. So we gave those two elements up. Everything else, revised goals are pretty similar. I just wanted to share some of the scheduling data that came out of the faculty, because this actually led us to the models that we currently want to explore and would like to pilot next year. We found that 65% of the faculty think it's in the best interest of students to make a schedule change. So 65% believe that there's a better schedule than our current 8-period, 45-minute schedule. 60% think, it's important for teaching and learning across the whole block. In considering schedule change options, 65% of the faculty thought a rotating schedule with one dropped period would be beneficial to our students. This came out to be the most popular model of all the models that we looked at. And I'll talk about that in a minute in terms of why and how that relates to our goals. But 65% felt it would be most beneficial for our students. So here is a 7-period drop one rotation, and I just want to take a few minutes to talk about it, because when people hear 8-period and then they hear 7-period, there's this thought process that we're giving up a period. That's it's going to be one less academic period for students to take, one less elective time for students to take. That's not the case at all. We currently have 8 periods in our day, but there are only 7 periods that students can schedule into, because one of those periods are a lunch. So it's our priority to keep 7 periods built into our schedule. How we do it is what we need to discuss and what we need to figure out. We would never want to go below 7 periods in our schedule, because we feel our electives would be impacted dramatically. We don't want to go away from that at all. So we were looking at models where you'll always have 7 periods that students can schedule into. What this schedule does, this is called as I said, a 7-period drop one rotation. This is a very popular model. Westford has it, Wachusett has it. There's a number of schools in the area that use this type of schedule. You can see that it gives you 7 periods, one of which doesn't meet each day of the cycle. So on day A1, you would have period 1, it's a 55-minute class, period 2, 55-minute class, period 3, and period 4, and this is where the difference lies, is in the lunch period. You implant the 3 lunches during that period. So students either go to class at the beginning, stay for the whole class, then go to lunch, or they go to class and then halfway through class they go to lunch and then come back to class, okay? Or they stay the full time, and if I screwed that up, excuse me, but and then they return. So we're breaking our period up into 3 separate lunches. They still get the 55 minutes of academic time, but it's broken up. Right now we have 36, 31, and there'd be additional 5 minutes in the middle for passing, so that would be really 36 minutes and 36 minutes for a lunch period. That's currently 9 minutes, 9 minutes shorter than our current lunch period right now. So we think students and faculty would find this acceptable. We would also look at ways to get a minute or two back on that. We have some ideas that we're talking about, some ideas I want to talk to Andrew about as well regarding his start time and our start time. But you'd see each day a student would drop one class. A student wouldn't have homework in that one class. It would be one night they'd be able to move away from that. It allows for our every other day courses to meet. It really meets all the needs that our current schedule has, and in my opinion, it doesn't take a whole heck of a lot of things away. In 1994, we switched from a 7-period schedule to a 8-period schedule. And we did that at the time, had a large part to do with the fact that we didn't have enough rooms and we had to better utilize space, and this was before the building project. But for many, many years we worked off a 7-period schedule. It didn't rotate, but it's the same exact model and same exact concept. So it does work. We've started to do a prototype. We took our 8-period schedule data, we've built it into a 7-period schedule. We're taking a look at what schedules look like. We're taking a look at what the conflict ratio looks like. It's very important for us that students are still able to get. We try to assure that no fewer than 85% of our students get 100% of their requests, and with this schedule we'll be able to continue to do that based on everything we've looked at this point. I think that'd be a very successful build. So we're excited about this model. I think it's a good direction for the high school to consider. We are looking at it as a pilot next year, and we have one other model that we are considering off this. And this, all this really changes is that this provides a long block during the rotation. This provides a 70-minute learning block that would rotate through these six periods. It means that our class times go down to 52 minutes, which is a drop from the 55. But this is also something we're looking at and we're considering. Okay, so I guess this is where we're at. Right now we're in the process of, I guess you'd call it a feasibility study. Tina, again, with a little bit of help from me. I did scheduling for a long time, but I very quickly forgot a lot of it. Tina is creating that schedule that fits our current data. We're going to build it, we're going to load it, which means putting the students in and see what the schedules look like. We're a few weeks away from accomplishing that. And you know, once we do that, we're going to sit down as a leadership team and share data with the community in terms of what that will look like. For next year, if everything looks good, we would like to build and implement a 7-period drop 1 schedule and possibly have the long block for half the year or percentage of the year as well to see where that fits in. At the end of the year, we'd evaluate. We would talk about our 8-period schedule again, and we'd put that up against what our 7-period drop 1 and our 7-period drop 1 rotation block would look like, and look at 2021 as a year to implement the schedule. Yes?
Is it okay if I ask a question before
Sure.
we move on to the next?
I'm sure there's plenty.
Actually, I just wanted to say that considering the latest cognitive research and learning out of, MIT, Stanford, Harvard, that really you get 10 minutes of time of student attention and then you need to do something else. I'm wondering, and I'll say, I think the pushback from the students with the block scheduling was that it was the same teaching format, but now we just have to do it for twice as long.
Right.
So I guess I would say I am completely on board with this idea. I think it's really important, but it's not going to be beneficial unless we really look at what's happening in all of our classrooms. And I'm talking about the math class, the science class, everything. And so what do you see in terms of your teaching staff? What are they interested in taking this extra time to explore innovative ways of looking at material instead of just straight lecture?
I'm going to ask Beth to jump in for
Okay,
a moment.
cool. Thanks.
Go ahead. When you're principal, you can
Stick
do
the
that.
girl in the skirt up here. Right, so last year when we knew we were doing the alternating block, we spent most of our professional learning time looking at how to teach differently in the block. I saw the same thing, so when I looked at all the student survey data, they were actually really good about it. So their comments were, teachers who taught differently, and I didn't coach them, teachers who taught differently, this felt good, this felt interesting, and then just what you said, like, but some teachers didn't, and so it was not great. So our department leaders have been talking about this for a while, and our staff as well. And so when I look at the percentage of the staff that says they think this is better for teaching and learning, and that's the majority of our staff, that gives me a lot of hope around that, and it's certainly where it aligns with the things that we've been looking at in our instructional and assessment goals in the school improvement plan that have been that way for the past several years, and with a lot of the, I will say, with a couple of the ground up professional learning communities that we've been working with, like the disciplinary literacy group. And I think math is actually a really good example of this. So we have 2 math teachers who were part of our literacy cohort and have been extremely invested in discussion, right? And what that looks like in a classroom. So Sunujit and Jess Janice, they actually share a same room so that they can physically make the room work for them in terms of their discussion work. When you walk into the room, you'll see around the walls like the language that they're using with students around discussion. And Bill Nowith has been really good about giving them a platform in the department to talk about that. They led one of our professional learning sessions this last week. It filled up like immediately and was one of the sessions that people from across the building came to, because you could imagine if 2 math teachers are doing a session on discussion and you're from the social studies department, you want to hear what they're talking about. That's exciting. And then I just lost my train of thought. Additionally, I think it aligns with the places we need to go around social emotional learning as well, and lines up really well with a lot of the work being done around formative assessment that I actually see across the building. So I've seen really good examples of it in science, in social studies, in English, and in math as well. And that if you're going to build in those formative assessments, even that 10 extra minutes is going to help you a lot. And then I remember it now, the other math piece that I was talking to Bill about yesterday that lines up with that 70-minute piece is they talked last year, because they're very nervous about the alternating block last year, but they got really excited about like these problems that allow for extended learning, and the way they explained it to me is like there's usually one that can fit in a unit that doesn't have to be done at a particular time. You could do it as a thing into the unit, you can do it in the middle of the unit, you can do it at the end of the unit. And he was saying yesterday that they're actually excited when they look at those 2 different schedules about that 70-minute rotating. They were not as much about the alternating block, but having that opportunity once every couple weeks to really dig into something, I think fits the needs of the department. So some people in the department who are really over here and wanting to do some more of that learning, and some people who really are still pedagogically behind the shorter classes. But so I think it's a nice place for, and I use that department because I think that's the one we think of as so traditional. And I think hearing him talk yesterday got me really excited that this will provide a nice opportunity for them to be able to think about some of those curricular things in a way that can meet them where they are.
Can I follow up? Is that okay? Real quick. So I've had multiple conversations with different people out of MIT that are really kind of spearheading a lot of these initiatives across the state. And the response that I've gotten is that, oh, you're from Acton Boxborough. Your district is probably one of the most innovative, more interested in doing these things. So it's so exciting to hear you say that because, you know, we don't necessarily see it. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm just going to pick.
Want to finish the? No, not at all. No, please. I'm always happy to step away from the mic. I thought what we'd do is we'd finish the section on our school improvement goals. I'm going to ask Beth to present on that, and then we can go back to any questions regarding the schedule. Ready?
Yeah, right. So I'm going to do like the highlight reel of our school improvement plan. I assume it is something that you all have in full and that I don't need to read it to you. So I really tried to look for strategies in each area that I'm excited about and that are either really new or that are extensions, important extensions from work that we've done in the past. We continue to use this driving question to think about all of our work, particularly in our leadership teamwork. So our driving question continues to be, how can staff, students, and families support wellness and balance within a rich learning environment that provides opportunities for all students to experience success? And this idea of all students to experience success is something that speaks to us, that it's not just success in a AP class, it might be success in proscenium circus or art or community service, and really trying to look at how we expand that notion. So we have 3 school improvement goals. 2 are continuations from the past couple years. Our first goal is around school and student wellness, and we've been working in that area for a number of years now. Our second goal is around classroom instruction and assessment, and you heard me speak a little bit about that a minute ago. A new goal for us is related to equity, diversity, and inclusion, and it's something that I'm really excited about the high school. I see us building off the work of the district, and in particular the work of the junior high. So in terms of our school and student wellness goal, a couple of the things that I wanted to highlight, areas that we're working on this year, are continuing to support student wellness by evaluating the schedule. So you heard Larry talk about that, heard me talk about that a little bit. And then we did continue our student learning series that we started last year. It was monthly last year. We surveyed students in a variety of ways, both kids who had come to sessions but also our seniors, and tried to really learn some lessons from that. Some of our sessions were relatively well attended last year, and by relatively, the highest was probably 50. Some were pretty low, had low attendance, and I think things we discovered were that anything that is these are not shocking things. Anything that's student-led is going to get a bigger draw. Anything that's active and doesn't make them feel like we're preaching to them is going to get a bigger draw. And in any ways we can get outside of a classroom space and into the larger school is just going to draw kids in. These, again, not rocket science. But so we're doing 4 this year. Our wellness coordinator is also our student wellness committee leader, so that's been a really nice pairing. We didn't have it that way before. And our first lunch came right from something the students wanted, and they wanted to look at green spaces and like planting, and we had 100 students, so it was like twice of what we'd had last year. And I think part of it was the student-led piece, part of it was the play aspect. We just had a lot. It was a great day. They're also going to do a pop-up tomorrow, so thinking about the wellness lunches a little bit differently, where there will be games and activities in different parts of the school. So that's been nice to see that grow a little bit. And then this third bullet, which I think is one of has been one of the harder things for us to do, and we're going to continue to hammer away at that, is help students identify strategies to promote resiliency and manage short-term stress. We have always tried to embed this into advisory. I think the thing that we need to keep doing is pushing it more and more into the classroom. I am hearing anecdotally, especially some of our newer teachers who are successfully bringing some things like mindfulness into the classroom, whereas I have heard other teachers in the past trying it and kids really balking against it. So I don't know if that's a change among the students that they're more willing to lean into that a little bit, but that's certainly nice to hear. In our professional learning day last week, a third of the sessions were related to things like mindfulness and resiliency, and they were very well attended from teachers across the building, which was really nice to see as well. So we continue to have a goal related to classroom instruction and assessment. This year, the focus of the professional learning around that goal is really within the departments, more so than whole school. So last year, we did a lot of whole school work around this, especially leading up to the schedule pilot. And this year, departments are taking that on more around areas that they see as needs for their departments, but particularly if we're going to be looking at longer periods. So, for example, with English, they are looking very closely at the idea of engagement, and particularly engagement with texts, and bringing in more choice texts and more modern texts into the curriculum, and how to use potentially longer class periods to allow for more, even more reading, but more discussion and engagement around choice texts. And the way that we've continued to see this playing out in world language is around the proficiency work, which takes a lot of training and a lot of time, and it has been a big shift in that department. Something small but big this year is we've adjusted our mid-year week timing. Really, we've been very concerned, as I'm sure any of you with children in the high school know, with the way assessments look like leading up to the mid-year. So the mid-year week itself has been very successful, but the couple weeks leading up have been not as great. So students just being assessed for like 2 weeks straight up until mid-year. So we've moved it a little earlier this year. We're not doing the calendar that we've done before that teachers felt and students echoed as well was constraining, because if you have to do a test on Tuesday and then you find your kids aren't ready on Tuesday, that doesn't promote the kind of teaching that we're hoping for. So with it being a little earlier this year, the idea is teachers can only do one assessment. So we don't need to do a calendar because we think that'll ease it out on its own. Plus we have a new policy around moving assessments, which kids have actually been using quite a bit. So we're hoping that helps this year, and we'll be able to get that feedback right away. We usually collect feedback about mid-years every year. So equity, diversity, and inclusion goal is a new goal for us. I would be remiss if I did not thank the district for sending a couple teachers to the SEED training 2 years ago and sending a group of us this summer. I was one of those fortunate enough to go. It is a significant investment, I think, in terms of cost, but I think that the benefit is great. I have been a part of several Train the Trainer models, and I will say that this is qualitatively different, and that I think those of us have come back have really feel like this is our work, and felt that the way that training week looks, while I don't think any of us came back and like, we know exactly how to do this work now, feel so committed to it, and have the benefit of having others in the district who are trained in it, that we feel like we can do this. So last year, the group who did it worked with the central office administration. This year, Maureen, Lynn, and I are working with assistant principals and department leaders around this equity and diversity training. There are also 3 professional learning offerings throughout the year, and it's something that we're specifically embedding into our professional learning this year. and then a really exciting part of it, a natural outgrowth is embedding some of this work into advisory. So really looking at, and we've done this with advisory in the past. As we work to train teachers on something, then if it makes sense, we're asking that to pull that into advisory. So we're never saying to teachers like, here's this really difficult thing we want you to do in advisory. Go, have fun. We do it with them first. And simultaneously last year, Mike Jorbo, one of our deans, helped create a student-led group called the Cultural Council, who's very interested in this work, so we've been working to partner with them as well. Again, that student-led piece we see as really beneficial, and they're excited to think about advisory lessons around equity and diversity as well. So those are just some of the highlights of the school improvement plan and ways that we're hoping to get it going this year. Questions?
Michael.
I have a couple questions. First, can we go back to the slides of the next step?
Which slide? Sorry.
The next step, 19 and 20.
Okay.
Okay, so if you look at the section 19 to 20, and then we're going to pilot both the 7 drop 1 and the 7 with rotating long block. How do we want to pilot this in the next school year? Is it like half time? The first half we do the first option, and then the second half.
So we don't have a firm decision yet, but yes, that's what we've talked about, is potentially doing one for one semester and one for another semester. I think one of the things we learned last year with our pilot is that it simply wasn't long enough to really get good information. So you have 3 snow days, and suddenly it feels like this is a terrible schedule, but that you're not living in it. And where we're going to have the 7 period have to build a 7-period schedule anyways, this feels like this is a good option.
Okay. All right, my second question is, since this, because it looks like we're the probably first one or first to fail school district doing this block change, right? So I'm just curious, with this change, it means that we will have the change of teaching, right? How we teach, right? How the teacher teaches, right? To get used to this, right? So I'm just curious if we have, or the Massachusetts has training program for the teachers to, adapt this change, to help them adapt this change. So,
not that I know of, like in that specific way, but like Amy was pointing out, there's a lot of research about how to teach in longer periods. Certainly, our Challenge Success partner has a lot of suggestions and ideas around that. But we also have departments who have, for a very long time, been wanting to do things that they've been constrained around within the 47-minute and now 45-minute period. So I think, we looked at a lot of research last year around teaching in longer periods, including brain research around like just what you were saying about how often you need to shift and where the peak times for things like lecture or hands-on work exist. So we've already been laying that foundation, and there's a lot out there.
but I do understand there are a lot of, research available online, right? So, but it just, it will rely on the teachers to search them and read them, right? So you could provide links, you could give them, the information where they can find, but I'm more curious about if we can provide a training program, come up with a training program, and then provide and help them.
We do, we can, and we do. Part of our professional learning program is to support teachers going out to various conferences to learn how to instruct differently, and bringing in people who share those skills and have worked in that way. So there isn't one school of, to learn how to teach longer, but there's all sorts of different strategies. I can tell you over the last 5 or 6 years, I have made a point to get into every single classroom, watch every single teacher at least once. And over the 5, 6, 7 years, I've really seen an evolution. Teachers are looking to kids to take more responsibility for their learning. They're looking for students to do more inquiry-based activities in the classroom. They're looking for more authentic learning to occur in the classroom. It takes longer for a student to go through a process to get an answer than it does for a teacher to say, this is what the answer is, and write it on the board. So we have teachers out there who need that time right now, and that's why they're in favor of this type of schedule. They have the knowledge, they have the skills to do this. Many of them just don't have the time. That said, there are teachers that will benefit from some professional learning and some strategies and some help from their colleagues in terms of how to best use an additional 10 minutes.
Right. So you're saying that in the professional learning or professional development sessions for the teachers, so you're going to bring some experts to talk about, to give the lectures to help them. Okay.
Yeah. We have, there's two philosophies. We like to bring in specialists, and we also feel as though we have a lot of fantastic specialists already in the building, teachers who are really doing it right. And our last professional day was really spent on teachers who had specific strengths in specific areas, sharing those with other teachers. And those are fantastic, because not only do teachers learn in that moment, they build relationships with other teachers and they share. And we find those very effective.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, Maya.
Thanks for a great presentation. I thought it really had a tone of a real focus on wellness. And I loved your comment, Larry, about turning down the temperature and decreasing transitions. So I'm excited for this to roll out. I had a question about the lunch period. Currently, do you have 4 or 5 lunch?
We currently have 4 47-minute lunch periods. And
you'll cut them to 3. So I just wondered if that means more lines, or what will that mean for students during lunch?
We were able to test a little bit of that during the pilot because we actually brought it down to 2 lunches. Now many of the students, juniors and seniors have privileges, will leave and go have lunch elsewhere. So there are not 1,837 students that use the lunchroom. I think there's probably, it wouldn't surprise me if there were 25% or a third that didn't use the lunchroom. Currently, we're renovating our Common C, and we're taking our Common C, some of you had a chance to see it when you came down and toured the building. We've taken that offline. We've had that offline since the beginning of the school year, and when I go into the lunchrooms, I'm not seeing lines, I'm not seeing people have to wait. We have enough seating. So I'm pretty convinced that we can handle 3 lunches. We had 3 lunches when we were a 7-period schedule before. We went up to about 1,600 students probably before we made that switch. So we're pretty close to those numbers, and I think we can accommodate those lunches effectively.
But it is a shorter period, is that right?
It'll be
more students.
We're hoping it's going to be 8 or 9 minutes shorter than the current
so that's just, I guess
45 minutes.
That'll be something you guys really look at, because that seems a bit stressful to me, someone who's rushing to eat, if the line is longer and I have less time.
Right.
So.
Yeah, that's definitely an area we're going to look at. If there are ways of getting any minutes back into the schedule, those minutes would go towards the lunch period. But A 36-minute lunch is on the high side for a public school, and I know it's a takeaway, those 9 minutes are lost, but we're hopeful that students will still be able to get out, do what they need to do, if they're juniors and seniors, if that's what they choose to do, and still have some downtime.
Okay, we'll take, I see 3 hands, so let's wrap this up. So 3 questions. So Tessa, I'll take yours first.
I just want to say thank you, that it's so valuable to hear progressive, positive things that are happening at the high school. I think it's really easy to get caught up in hearing stuff that maybe comes from just particular families, but it's out there, and I think that the high school is often the least understood of the schools that we have. So I love to hear more of this, because I think that it's great for all of us to hear that some of the things that we often hear about are going on in the junior high or the elementary schools are also always going on at the high school too, and I just want to thank you, because it's comforting to hear those things, and to know that that's all. I mean, we would assume that about our whole district staff, but it is really nice to hear the specific examples, and we get a little bit from our student representative, but it's nice to hear coming from the teacher perspective too.
Okay, Eileen?
Thank you very much for the presentation. I would like to bring back to Goal 3, that slide. Yeah, Goal 3. Yeah. Okay, go back. I especially like to give the sum up for create the last lines, create a series of advisory lessons, and make them, promote to like the student respect to each other, understanding each other, have empathy for other student, and appreciate for diversity experiences. That's so very important. Thank you so much. And there are several questions. I really have, I don't know if everybody understand that or not. I need a little bit clarify for, what is that slide number? For the 2 explanation for a period drop 1 rotation from the first one and second one.
So what those 2 different schedules mean?
Yeah. What about P3 from 10:08 to 11:06? That P3 and P4. Can you explain a little bit more?
Are you asking why, like, period 3 is a little bit longer, for example?
Yeah.
Yeah. So our third period has traditionally always been longer because we do announcements during that time.
Okay.
So that's what that means. And then the period 4 is a similar amount of time, but what you see in the parentheses is the lunch. So you'll either have lunch, right, first, and then your whole class, or you'll have what's called a split lunch, which means I'll do half of my class, then I'll have lunch, then I'll come back and do the other class. Or, yeah.
What means the other class, or
The other
different
half of my
class, or just
Same
one?
class, same class. So I went to school on a split lunch model. So the teacher would, do a section of our learning for like 20 minutes. We would go to lunch, and then we would come back and we would do the second portion of it. One of the nice things about this schedule is because it rotates, it's not the same class. So for me, one year it was like I had math split lunch all year long. But because this rotates, it won't be the same class every day that has that split lunch.
I don't know if we have any data, any. So is that really practically working, or I'm curious about it?
The large majority of schools operate under some form of a split lunch schedule. We were really unique to have 4 periods where we were able to offer lunch with that 8 period, to offer a 47-minute lunch. There aren't a lot of schools that do that. Depending on how big the school is and how much room they have in the cafeteria, there's very few schools that can fit the entire enrollment in the lunchroom at one time, so they have to split it. And the most efficient way to split it is to split it during a period. So you're not giving up another period for that lunch. So I would say 95% of the schools have some form of a split lunch. So this is pretty common, but it is a change.
Yeah, my concern is not about the split lunch. Lunch is fine. My concern is split the instruction time.
Yeah.
I can actually jump in on that. So what Larry said is accurate, that most schools, nearly every high school in the state, does this exact model, where there's classes broken up by a lunch. That's very normal for high schools to do. Teachers oftentimes, as an example of something instructionally, this is the model that I came from personally. So oftentimes teachers, when they have a split lunch, they might use that long period during the lunch to do some instruction during the first part. It's also a great opportunity, maybe coming back from lunch, to then do an assessment, a quick check-in with kids. So it really is not as large of an impact as one might expect.
Okay. So for the second one,
So,
I'm sorry.
I'm going to actually move on to someone else. I think Angie had a final question, and
But
we're going to wrap it up.
I
Okay.
really wanted to continue with this,
I appreciate that, so maybe in an email you could send it.
No, just one more, okay, just one more.
Eileen, I'm going to say no to that. Just
I have a different.
to be sensitive to people's time, I'm going to move on to Angie's question, but thank you.
The new schedule, you mentioned a little bit about the teacher collaboration, because my understanding right now, my more focus is on the student homework and the number of tests that the student is dealing with, because a lot of time with the current schedule, the reason because there's not that much of collaboration among the teachers. How would the new schedule be able to help the teacher in terms of on daily schedule, so they can collaborate in terms of homework assigning and a test? Let me finish my second question.
Yeah.
The second question is also related to homework. And for the academic help, for students jumping from the junior high to high school, that there is a homework transition. So what structure that the student has provided in terms of supporting the student for the homework, the transition? Thank you.
All right. I'll be good for the first question. I'll need help on the second. But when you actually look at teacher collaboration happens. It happens after school. It happens in the morning. It happens when they may happen to have free periods. It happens when it can happen. It's not built into the day in our current schedule. And you asked me if there's actually a greater possibility for collaboration in a schedule like this, just for the simple reason that the lunches are broken up geographically. So our social studies department is in a certain geographic area of the building. They will all have the same lunch schedule. So those teachers will be free for 35 minutes at the same time. Many of those teachers join in their department centers. They sit at a common table. They talk. They'll plan. I'd like teachers just to have lunch, but they don't work that way. They work hard during those lunch periods. So this provides a lot more opportunity for that, for them to sit down and just talk sometimes about, what are you doing in this class? Where are you at in this unit? So this actually doesn't bring teachers together as much as I'd like to, but it brings the teachers together more than our 8-period schedule currently does,
Okay.
systematically.
Okay.
I mean, the other thing I would say about the collaboration piece, at the leadership table, it's something that we've acknowledged that since it's not physically put in the same way that the schedule we looked at last year, that we need to look at other methods to make sure that happens. So we'll continue to pursue formal means by which teachers can, request collaboration time, or ways
So
that
the
we can
second
build it
part.
in.
The
Yep,
academics?
I'll move to the second part. So, certainly, we know that the homework load, and just even the way the day is paced out from 8th to ninth grade feels very different for students and families. Certainly, one of my expectations for ninth grade teachers is that they're working with that deliberately. I taught ninth grade English. I taught that heterogeneous ninth grade English class, and spent a great deal of time looking at metacognitive work around executive functioning, right? I had kids working with their planners constantly and thinking about timing, and doing things like timed readings, having them do their homework in class so I could help them start to think about how does that look differently. Because you don't only have the curricular change, you also have kids who are potentially adding in more activities or activities that now take longer. I think our social studies department did a nice job this year. They added in a unit on India that the junior high had previously taught, and worked really closely with the junior high around how did the methods here look compared to the high school, and so trying to make that transition smoother, starting with that unit. And have worked especially hard at that ninth grade curriculum to think about workload and not having it be such a dramatic change. We do, like the junior high, have an academic support center. We used to have a strong drop-in model, which we haven't for a long time, but we added a second academic support center 2 years ago, and are now able to encourage drop-ins in our main academic support center. So we do have a drop-in model that is important, and I think that was something I mentioned at back to school night, as well as ninth grade parent night. So we have a ninth grade parent night where parents rather, can meet with counselors, and we try to talk about some of those resources in the school. And the way our current schedule works now, there is a fair amount of opportunity for students to work with teachers during the day because they might share common periods. I think in the newer schedule, it'll be more around lunch, which might make it easier because they might have more likelihood to share at certain times of the year with their teachers. In that way, that'll be interesting to see about that piece, because that's one of the benefits.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you taking on the challenge of the scheduling alone is just, thank God for Tina.
Yeah.
I have to say.
She's
doing that pilot and doing that in the middle of the year as a pilot is just unbelievable. So thank you just for that. And I think the takeaway for all of us really is that this block schedule change really opens up many possibilities for like a laboratory of innovation approach to new teaching approaches, and we are very grateful for that as well. So thank you so much.
Thanks.
I'm going to try not to look at the time here. We were supposed to start the next one at 8:25, so. We're going to move on to item 10, which is the school building project update, and we also have a presentation. I'm going to hand it over to you, Mary.
Okay, so I'd like to welcome Emily Grandstaff Rice from Arrow Street. She's going to do a presentation for us. While she's coming up, I'd also like to introduce Chuck Adams, who's from Skanska, our owner's project manager organization. Arrow Street and Skanska have been tremendous partners with us. They have been working incredibly hard on their own with administrators in the district, staff, community members, and it's really been great. We're doing a lot of great work. I also, while I have your attention, want to point out you have a flyer at the desk for the forums that are coming up, as Peter mentioned, on the 27th and 29th, both here at 7 p.m. Please share this with folks. We have a Twitter, a Facebook, and an Instagram that Adam and Katie Raymond are doing. So share that with folks so they stay informed. We really want to get community input on the possible site locations. So Emily's going to kind of share where we've been, where we're going, and some of the site information.
Thank you all for being here tonight. And continuing your attention. It's been a long night, but fascinating to hear. So I'm Emily Grantstaff-Rice. I'm an architect. I'm a senior associate at Arrow Street. We are a 95-person architecture and design firm in Boston, but we're not the entire design team. We have a lot of consultants, especially electrical engineers, mechanical, plumbing, fire protection. We have permitting consultants, geotech. There's a very large team. And at some point, if you're ever interested in sort of all of the different people that contribute, in addition to who are in the community to make this project happen, I'm happy to present that. So this is a PDF, so bear with me for a second. Sometimes it's a little wonky. So when Arrow Street interviewed for this, we put forth 3 project goals. And in other words, kind of putting our stake in the sand of what we really wanted to bring to the table and help work with Acton Boxborough to realize your educational goals. So for us, it was to improve educational spaces for 21st century learning. We feel it is imperative that this building stand the test of the time, not just today, but for 50 years from now, because that's the MSBA sort of anticipated lifespan for schools that they're building today, as well as create spaces that build a sense of joy and community. What's the fun of designing schools unless schools are fun, right? So to imbibe that in all the things that we do, as well as to integrate environmental sustainability into school culture. One of the reasons we were so excited about this project in particular is how ambitious the district is about embracing its responsibility for today and of course the next 50 years, understanding that buildings in many cases are some of the biggest contributors to environmental resources and understanding that. So let's see if the button works this time. Yeah, there we go. So where are we in the process? We're in feasibility study. That's not the first time you've heard that phrase tonight. So in feasibility study, we're really sort of defining the parameters. We know how many students this building will be designed for. It takes the data that Marie presented tonight. It gives those 10-year projections. There's 2 models that was put forth with the MSBA. One is for a single school that would be built for 650 students. And of course, the other option is for a double school. And depending on whether the pairing is Douglas Gates or Douglas Conant, let's just say they're both around 1,000 students. So that would be 500 students per single school. So we're taking that information as well as existing conditions analysis of the existing buildings, the existing sites, and also an educational visioning progress. At your last school committee meeting, you voted on the educational plan. That's part of sort of the white boxes in there. There's a lot of things that are happening in parallel. So our next step is to really sort of hone in on what are the advantages of one site over another, and ultimately have a vote, as Peter said earlier, on December 19th. So I didn't mean to put these up kind of tongue-in-cheek today, but on a nice snowy night, it's nice to remember sort of why these sites are so beautiful. One of the amazing things about this community and the land that you own is that there's so much opportunity to bring the outside into the buildings, and that's, we keep that in mind when we're thinking about the way in which the building is oriented, and also opportunities to really celebrate what you have. And each of these sites are unique and has its own opportunities in terms of the landscape. And our landscape architect at the interview said, you know, I have clients who pay tens of thousands of dollars to get what you have already. So really to celebrate that as we move forward. So how are we approaching this larger design problem? We have put in the preliminary design program, and that's where we set the parameters of these are the things that we're going to study. That was paired with the educational plan that you voted on at the last meeting. These are sort of the 5 scenarios. You see 4 dots, but I'll explain why there's 5. 5 scenarios that we put forward to the state. Number 1, the state always asks projects to do a base code upgrade. In other words, how much would it cost if you took your existing building and just brought it up to code? Now, if your building was up to code, that number would be very small. Unfortunately, Douglas, Conant, and Gates all have accessibility issues. There's no fire suppression, the fancy word for it, no sprinklers, right? As well as other code issues in terms of the larger systems that have to be addressed. So we have to do that exercise so that the state can have a baseline when they compare projects across the board. So that's sort of option number one. But that's not putting anything in it to improve the educational spaces. It's just code only. And that's kind of why I consider that the scheme that's not even on the board here. We also need to look at what you could do if you were to do an addition renovation. They don't like districts to only put forth options for new construction because they want to have that comparable. And it also is a way in which when asked the question from towns, did you look at these options? You can say, yes, absolutely, we looked at these options. It is becoming more and more clear as we look at the existing facility of Douglas that a renovation addition would not meet the needs that you have for even a single school, let alone a double school, if you were to renovate portions of it. So for practical purposes, we're looking and really honing in on 3 new construction options. And this will come as no surprise, right? We're looking at a new construction twin school on the Douglas site. We're looking at a new construction twin school on the Gates site. And we're looking at a new construction twin school at the Conant site. And so I'm going to show you some site diagrams tonight just to sort of get you up to date with what we've been talking about with the school building committee. And each time I come back and talk about this, we find out a little bit more about the site. We're getting a little bit more information and these get refined. So sometimes I have to keep reminding myself that it's not always a linear path. Sometimes it's iterative and you learn things and you go back and you correct them and go forward. But happy to entertain specific questions as we go forward. So the base code upgrade, nothing's changed. It's a one-liner. It's really just us defining what that would be to bring it up to code. So I'm not going to spend much time on that. I do want to point out, it should say option 2. It says option 1, so my fault on that one. In an addition renovation, what we were proposing is that if you were to keep part of the Douglas school, you would keep the classroom portion. It's the same relative size of classrooms as you would build today, around 900, 950 square feet. But what is lacking in the current Douglas School is appropriate special education spaces. Your gym is undersized for what you would expect for an elementary school. The cafeteria is undersized. It was actually kind of fascinating listening to the whole lunch conversation with the high school because there are some major space needs if you were to build a facility to accommodate 650 students. So what we're also finding with some of the site configurations is that there's sort of a back and forth. We want to minimize the footprint because that's the most environmentally responsible thing to do, but we also are constrained with the site that we have. And so we quickly found out that although we'd like to keep it at a 2-story solution in many cases, we need to look at a 3-story solution. So just sort of to talk that through of what that would mean for a school. And of course, running these forward in order for us to be net zero water and net zero energy, we need to consider the size of a potential septic field for it as well as size for potential geothermal wells. And there's restrictions on those, especially in the case of the Douglas site where you're up against a perennial stream and there's a mandatory 75-foot setback from that stream where you can't build a roadway, a building, or a septic system or geothermal. And so that is one constraint on the site, as well as there's certain portions of the Douglas, Conant, and Gates sites that are also subject to the 100-year floodplain. You can build within a 100-year floodplain. It's not advisable because obviously you want the building to be up. It's just, try and avoid water when you can. Okay, I'm talking really fast, so bear with me for a second. I'm going to move on to what we're looking at for the Douglas and Gates site. Now, just to give you a little orientation, you might say, well, you just showed me Douglas, how did it get bigger? One of the things that we wanted to explore with the possibility is if we did have access to use the Elm Street playground, would that have an impact on what we could do with that site? And so you're seeing a study of what a twin school could look like on the Douglas parcel plus the Elm Street parcel. I understand that that is land that the district does not own, and there are definitely some political issues to that. You know, what I can put forward is what the shape of a building could be and what you could use that for site, but I'm just sort of leaving it out there without, there's many questions to be answered, but this is something that we are including in what we're looking at right now. On the gate site, looking at what a building could be for the twin school, we're finding that there's obviously more buildable area on the gate site. There is sort of an opportunity for the building to be oriented with optimal north and south orientations for the classroom windows, as well as maximizing some of the exterior envelope so you can get more classrooms with views to the landscape. And again, I'm breezing through this, so bear with me. And then, of course, we're also looking at Conant, what this would be. There are some site opportunities with Conant. Obviously, there's more buildable land. I do want to point out that one of the things that we have learned is that the stream that's on Conant is intermittent, so it's not subject to the same setbacks and wetland issues that you'd have at Douglas Gates. That's not a positive or negative, it just is what it is. And so we're looking at these in the mix. So if you wanted to sort of understand how big is this building, looking at all of the different program area that would need to support a state expectation for a school for 1,000 students, and again, I'm thinking 1,000, so 500. It's in the range of 187,000 square feet. And so that includes some shared space, and some shared space for special education, some shared space for obviously a kitchen, a cafeteria. This also includes the preschool program, so it would include 10 classrooms of preschool as well as the associated spaces for that. There's many other issues we're looking at in terms of, would this have a single entry, would this have multiple entries, how does this relate to form? But what we're looking at right now, and sort of the two major questions, are what site gives us the most opportunity, and what would work best for this solution. And there's obviously it's environmental responsibility, cost. That's something that we will be developing over the next month, so that when the decision needs to be made mid-December, we'll have a better idea of what these different solutions would cost, as well as how does this lay out in terms of having shared spaces. Transportation is huge. We're also trying to plan for a minimum of 180 parking spaces, which is a lot, but of course there's some concern that that's not enough. So there's a lot of things out there, and we could take many hours to answer questions, but I do want to have an opportunity to make sure that you feel like this is a good update. And there are opportunities to learn more. So we're going to have 2 community workshops right after Thanksgiving, as well as a sustainability workshop, to really give an opportunity to those who are concerned about energy and the land, to have an opportunity to speak to that. On December 6th, we anticipate a follow-up at your next meeting. And the 2 dates that we have set for the next school building committees are the 12th, and that's where we will present sort of our more refined solutions for the site for discussion, with the anticipation of a vote for a selected site on the 19th. And as was mentioned at the beginning of this meeting, this is all in preparation for a January 2nd submission to the MSBA. You might say, why would you have a deadline on January 2nd? I say that a lot. Why would you have a deadline on January 2nd? It's because it's 6 weeks before their board meeting on February 13th. And that's a date that's been set for over a year. So it's all about timeline and schedule. Thank you.
Any comments or questions?
Just thank you very much, Emily. And Chuck is our owner's project manager, and they've been on site significant amounts of time and working with us. Just a couple things. So what gets submitted on January 2nd includes the preferred solution in terms of a twin school with the preschool and the location. So the December 19th building committee meeting is the time when the building committee needs to decide really, are we talking about Gates? Are we talking about Conant? Thorough discussion last night. I think building it on Douglas is relatively ruled out. We're showing it, we've thoroughly investigated it. When you put a 3-story building as long and big on that narrow site, it just doesn't seem like it's going to work. But it's a big decision for the community, so we're looking for feedback, and it doesn't need to be tonight, but we wanted to get it out there. We have 2 forums in which we're really encouraging anyone interested to come and hear about this. Emily will present this with, probably a little bit more at those, and we'll be looking for feedback. It's a big decision. There are pros and cons to both the Gates site and the Conant site.
So Marie, so the final decision rests with the building committee?
Yes.
And so these 2 forums this is the chance for the public to weigh in on what preferences they might have.
Exactly.
So these are important dates to advertise.
I just want to clarify, I'd love the school committee to come and hear the community's input, but this meeting in December 6th is really your time for input. I really want to focus those forums on the community's input.
Can you just clarify what do you mean by the Douglas site, the single one? Can you just?
One of the diagrams that Emily showed was building a twin school on the Douglas site if we entertained a conversation with the town in which we did some kind of land swap that would include some of the town-owned land where on Elm Street. But and there was a lot to that as well. We'd have to recreate what's on Elm Street. But we think it's been ruled, it's a 100-year floodplain. It would have to be built up.
Michael?
So you mentioned that, we're going to do a land swap, right, with the Acton.
So we're not going to have to talk about that because we've ruled out the possibility of building a double elementary school on the Douglas Elm Street piece of property. So that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about either Gates Twin Elementary School on the Gates site for Gates and Douglas, or Twin Elementary School on the Conant site for Conant and Douglas.
But the thing is that if we make a decision by December 19th, right? Is it December 19th? And if we say we're going to pick Douglas and Gates, right? And then are we going to resolve that land issue with Acton before that, or?
There is no land issue. We have taken that option off the table.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So it's only on property that we own.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just to be clear, we had explored the Douglas and Elm Street combination option initially because we wanted to see what that looks like. There were a number of issues with that site that arose. The primary driving force that was causing the building to become unmanageable was there exists a significant portion of that Elm Street playground, nearly all of it, is structured on what's called a 100-year floodplain. You cannot build a building directly on the 100-year floodplain, so the design options that Emily was able to explore with her team included having to build nearly half of that school up on stilts. And in addition, because the site is fairly narrow, the building would sit extremely close to the roadway, and it would end up being a 3-story building built on stilts. That was incredibly imposing to the entire neighborhood around it. It also stretched the building out probably nearly a quarter of a mile Really,
It's long.
it was a really long building. It was not an appropriate site, and it would have been built on stilts on a floodplain. So we've ruled that out. That is not currently, it's going to be submitted to the state that it was explored, but we've ruled it out as an option going forward. So we're not going to need to explore any type of land.
Anyone else? Maya?
I just want to thank you two for staying out this late, and I wish you a safe drive home. Thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you.
It's really appreciated.
Yeah.
Thank
very
you.
much. Item 11 on the agenda, subcommittee and member reports. Amy, I'm going to hand it over to you for policy.
Yeah, so in your packet, you have the first read for, I'm going to get to it, the policy, school bus behavior expectations, file JICC or EEAEC, and it's a first read. So if you have any comments or questions, comments, I would say submit it to the policy subcommittee. We are going to meet again on Tuesday the 20th, so if you have any concerns or questions or comments, we can discuss it at that meeting. So that would be great. And then should I jump ahead to budget?
Can you set a deadline for any of us to send
By
along our-
Monday night would be great.
Monday
If you
night?
could have it by Monday night, if you have questions or comments, changes, then we can discuss it at the November 20th, the Tuesday meeting. That would be great.
Thank you.
And make those changes. And then budget, the next meeting is on November 20th, and we did not meet since our last school committee meeting. But Beth isn't here. Beth, I'm sorry, I don't have the 20th time on my schedule. That's for the policy, for budget. So 8 a.m., okay, perfect. So 8 a.m. on the 20th. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Adam, over to you for capital improvement.
Capital Improvement Committee met on the 24th of October. JD and Chuck, who just ran out of the room, reviewed some of the process that they've been going through to evaluate the CIP, and they introduced the work they're doing in terms of sort of consolidating and maximizing those projects. And then David Peters shared some information around some of the funding options. Our next meeting is November 29th at 5:45, just prior to the community forum here.
Okay, thank you. Marie, calendar?
We have a great calendar committee that's been meeting. It includes teachers, administrators, and school committee members, and you saw our survey went out last week. Closed yesterday. We've tabulated the results. We had a good, long discussion. This morning, we will be prepared to present to the committee December 6th for your consideration for next year's calendar, for a vote on December 20th.
Thank you, Marie. Acton Leadership Group?
Acton Leadership Group met a few weeks ago, and we discussed a little bit the point of view from the Finance Committee, and we talked about general budget issues, revenues, expenses, and looking forward.
Can I ask, yeah, I also have a question.
Mary?
I just want to note, on our last HIT, Health Insurance Trust meeting, we voted a 0% increase for the MedX, which is the retirement managed care and pharmacy benefit. And we've decided to vote our rates for next year at our November 30th meeting. Typically, we vote it in February. Last year we did it in January, but Because the trust has a very healthy balance, we feel we can make the decisions earlier, and we know it's better for the district and the town's budgeting. So we'll be doing that at the end of the month.
Okay, any other reports?
Can I ask a question on the leadership reports?
Sure.
Okay. So it says the capital overrides are coming without a change in spending, and operating override may become necessary. So is that like to be TBD, or that's, because I'm a little concerned on the two overrides altogether.
So that's part of the Finance Committee's point of view, sort of in a long-term look. So the capital override they're talking about is the building project, and potentially the town of Acton is looking at a fire station. There's no view in any plan for an operating override in the foreseeable future. Yeah, they just always put that out there as sort of a, you gotta be careful, if you spend too many reserves, you may end up in that situation, but,
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else have any reports? Okay, moving on to item 12. Do you want me to take that?
You want to?
Okay. Yeah, I have to take a look at it.
Yep.
I'll have to find it.
Yep.
So, yeah, go ahead. You can search for it. Okay, so we have, I'm sorry, we have a recommendation to approve a grant from the ABRP, Acton Bucksborough Regional PTSO, to RJ Gray Junior High to defray the cost of seventh graders' homework, organizational folders, and once I think, is it $1,000? It's $1,000. Okay.
Move to approve with gratitude.
Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you very much. Motion passes. Before we adjourn, like super quickly, I just want to draw your attention to one thing on the FYI, which is the memo from Deb Bookus on studio thinking. It's really worth a read. This memo it's really amazing. This new book features 3 case studies from teachers in our district, art teachers, at Miriam Gates, I guess, at McCarthy Town. And what it really does is they've embedded 21st century skills and attitudes into curricular instruction. And when you embed those types of skills into core curricular instruction, including the arts, which isn't core, but when you find that, it's really something special. And I just want to draw your attention to it so you can read it over and enjoy it. Oh, we have it. Terrific.
One, but it's available on Amazon.
Okay, seeing no other business, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So, second.
Okay, thank you. Good night, everyone.
Aye. I'm going to make a plug. Cabaret night is amazing. It's like a talent show at the high school. It is so fabulous. So if you have time Friday or Saturday night, it's a great show.